friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and we're now entering the 4th week of the Three Rivers Challenge. This is the Pantry Challenge that I do every January and February, and we're nearing the end of the first month. We're almost halfway done with the challenge. And so if you check the hashtag that I've linked in the description, you can find access to all of the other content that's been created by other channels out there that are also participating or that have been participating throughout the month of January. And then if you're new to this and you're just hearing about it now, I will be continuing the challenge through the month of February, and you can always join in. The goals of this pantry challenge are just to save a little money, to use up what we stored away last year during the growing season so that we can make room for what we plan on growing this year, to get a little creative in the kitchen, and to also create less food waste. So I have lots of videos out there about the point of the pantry challenge. I will link some of them in the description, but I'd love to have you join us through the month of February. So all right, enough talking. Let's see what we ate this week here during the pantry challenge. All right, it's Sunday morning breakfast, and my son usually makes biscotti on Saturday mornings, but for some reason we weren't able to, and so he did it for Sunday morning instead. So we're having his wonderful cinnamon and sugar biscotti. Levi, get your finger out of your nose, you silly boy. Anyways, they're just eating David's biscotti with some mandarin oranges, getting a little vitamin C. We love this. It's an easy breakfast. And we always, on biscotti days, allow the kids to dunk their biscotti in a little coffee, and they like that treat. For lunch today, I just found 2 random mystery soups. I'm assuming this one is split pea soup, and we've thawed it. This other one, I'm not quite sure what's in it, but I do know that I'm gonna mix these 2 together and add a little bit of broth. I have this French onion soup base. It's just beef broth and onions that I can every year, and I figure if I mix all 3 of these things together, we'll end up with something delicious. You really can't go wrong with soup. So we're going to put it in this big pot and get it on the wood stove simmering. And then while we do church, that'll be wonderful. So you can see this mystery soup had carrots, it had some chicken in it, it had mushrooms. And so that'll be a great addition to the flavors of the split pea soup and then the onion base. There it is, all mixed together, simmering on the wood stove. And then my husband is a big fan of canned fish. So in the pantry, he has lots of these canned tins of fish. And there's some pickled ginger that he would like to have with lunch as well. So we're all eating our soup with crackers, and then we're having canned, I believe there was octopus in a sauce. We had scallops, and we had, what was the other one? Oysters. Now, I am not a fan of canned fish, but my husband loves it. So I'm grateful that he gets my kids to try these foods that maybe I would be less likely to expose them to. But I know the canned fish is good for you. It has lots of nutrients that your body needs. And yeah, maybe I should learn to like it a little more. I'm just really not a fan. But it was a great opportunity to clear some of this out of the pantry, and the kids really enjoyed it. Our canned fish of choice in the house is typically sardines. We do them in water a lot because of the calcium. They are super high in calcium, and as a dairy-free family, we need that added nutrition. All right, and then this afternoon, I'm going to work on grinding grains. I have a Nutri-Mill here, and I am not a huge fan of this machine. I'm going to show you why in a minute, but first, we're going to do some blue corn, and we're going to grind it into blue cornmeal here. And it's just such a wonderful color when you bake with it. I'll show you later in the week. It turns your baked goods a lovely dark blue color. It's just gorgeous. And so I'm going to put the cornmeal in a jar here, and we will save that for later this week. And while I have the mill out, I'm going to do the rest of my grains for the week. We're going to do some buckwheat. This is whole buckwheat with the hulls still on it. That is not my preferred buckwheat. I prefer it to be hull-less, because you get a finer buckwheat flour that way. But I got a really good deal. It's much cheaper to buy it when it has the hulls still on it, and I couldn't pass up the deal when they were selling it. So as you can see, this is why I don't like this mill. I have to put a towel over the top of the canister because it tends to spit flour everywhere, and it's super messy. So I do not recommend this mill. But there is my buckwheat flour. As you can see, the hulls are mixed in with the buckwheat, so you would need to sift that out if you don't want that in your flour. Okay, and then finally today we're going to do some soft white wheat berries. I use soft white wheat berries for baked goods like muffins and pancakes and soft breads and anything other than, I guess, bread that needs to rise. You use hard wheat berries for things that you need to rise like bread that because the hard wheat has a higher gluten content. So here is what that looks like all ground up, just a beautiful powder. Now, baking with freshly ground wheat flour is very different than baking with regular flour. It's a lot fluffier, and so you need to use a little more and adjust your recipes. Here is what all of that looks like in the jar. As you can see, there is the bran from the wheat, and there's the hull from the wheat, or from the buckwheat. I'm going to need to sift those out if I want a flour that's like a store-bought flour. I'm going to store these in the fridge, though, for this week. All right, but we're going to work on dinner now, and we are going to have pork chops. First, I'm making a marinade. I have Italian seasoning, I have balsamic vinegar, I have olive oil, and then I have a couple of lemons and some raw honey. And we're just going to mix all of this together, and this is going to be our marinade for the pork chops. And then with our pork chops, we're going to eat some fried potatoes. So I'm just slicing up my potatoes. I'm trying to use up as many raw potatoes as I can right now. They're starting to soften and sprout a little bit. I have lots of potatoes that I've canned and that are frozen in storage. I also have some dehydrated and freeze-dried potato powders that I still need to use up. But before I even dig into any of that, I need to use up those raw potatoes. And if we don't use them up and they sprout, it's okay. We'll just plant them in this year's garden and they'll give us more potatoes. No big deal. And then you guys have gotten me hooked. This Old Bay seasoning, you guys are right. It's really good on potatoes. So that is what we're seasoning our fried potatoes with today. I've got some oil in our cast iron pan, and we are going to sear these pork chops that have been marinating. I'm usually prefer to save my pork chops to grill outside, but it's just too cold to grill right now. So pan searing is the next best thing to grilling your pork chops. And then we've got our potatoes frying up. This will be a yummy dinner here on a Sunday night. There we go. We just sear them for maybe 4 minutes on one side, flip them over, sear them on the other side. And then we're having a jar of canned homegrown okra, carrots, and green beans. That'll be our vegetable side dish with the potatoes and the pork chops tonight. And here we go. I also, with the pork chops, potatoes, and vegetables, made a little apple pie, but I was feeling kind of lazy and didn't want to roll out my crust, so we just crumbled the crust on top of it, and you know what? It gets the job done. The kids liked it just as much as regular rolled out pie crust. And here we go. That's what dinner looked like. Nice Sunday night dinner before Adam heads back to work. There's what the pie looked like. No complaints from the kids there on that. So, all right, Monday morning, let's make some buckwheat pancakes from that buckwheat flour that I just ground up. We are not going to sift it. We're just going to leave the hulls in it. So I'm going to use 1.5 cups of buckwheat flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1.5 cups of some kind of liquid. We're going to use cashew milk today. 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 1 egg. That's the recipe, but I am tripling it for my family because one part of that recipe would not go very far. So it's a Monday morning. The kids are very slow in waking up, so I can take my time and just sit here and drink my tea and flip a pancake or two at a time and serve them to the kids as they wake. So they'll be warm for each kid as they come down the stairs and wake up. So buckwheat is actually a gluten-free option. I can actually have these pancakes since there's no wheat flour in it. It just makes a really lovely pancake. Buckwheat kind of has an earthy taste, but we love it. And then we are going to top it with this home-canned blueberry syrup. I'll do half blueberry syrup with the blueberries, and then I'll also pour some maple syrup on top. This is what the syrup looked like. It was just canned blueberries with a little sugar and water, and adds a little bit of antioxidants to the pancake. And I think they were a hit. Uh-oh. Oh no, he dropped his fork. John, he's so silly. He's usually one of my first ones down in the morning wanting breakfast. That's why you see him pretty often, because he's the first one that I'm plating food to. So let's try again now with a clean fork. Let's see how he likes the buckwheat pancakes. Gabe's down. It is time for him to try. All right. This is what we had on Monday morning, and it was a hit. Another good meal. For lunch today, we are going to make energy bites. I have some dates in the food processor. We're going to add sunflower seed butter, some cashew pieces, and some chocolate chips. We're just going to put all of this into the food processor together. I don't measure it out. I just scoop in whatever sounds good and adjust it as needed until I get it to the right texture or wetness. You can add anything to these. You can add shredded coconut, you can add honey, maple syrup, any kind of nut, whatever you want. And it's just a healthy little treat. It's not the prettiest thing to look at, but that's what it looks like when it comes out of the food processor. And all I do is I just take a little bit and I roll it into a golf ball sized ball and put it on a plate. You can stick them in the fridge and they'll kind of harden a little bit and be a little less messy to eat. Or if you're short on time, just roll them like this and the kids will enjoy them that way. So we're going to eat these today. You just put them on a plate and the kids grab as many as they want. We're also going to have some mandarin oranges. We're still working through all those boxes of citrus. So we're having that. We're also, oh, they want the oranges. We're also having popcorn. We like to have popcorn for lunch every now and then, just as a treat. Why not have a snacky lunch? It's fun. And then we like to sprinkle nutritional yeast on our popcorn. I get my nutritional yeast in bulk from Azure Standard. It's really high in B vitamins, so it gives a cheese flavor to the popcorn, and it's also packed with those vitamins that are really good for you. So that's a nice addition to your popcorn. Not all of my kids enjoy that on their popcorn, though. So we each put a little popcorn on our plates, and then anybody who wants the nutritional yeast will sprinkle it on. That's what it looks like. It's nice that it's orange. It kind of looks like cheese, and it tastes like cheese. So the kids are enjoying those energy bites. A nice, simple lunch. Now we're going to work on dinner. I've got some steak all chopped up here. We're going to make some kind of stir fry. We've got some rice going, and this was kind of a last minute thrown together. I was scrambling. School kind of ran over a little bit, so this is what we came up with. I added some freeze-dried veggies to the steak as it was cooking. This is freeze-dried green beans and freeze-dried peas. I'll have to add a little bit of water to this to rehydrate them just a bit, but I don't want to add too much. And there we go. We added salt and pepper and a couple other seasonings that I can't quite remember, but just that with some rice, easy peasy dinner. Now we're still working through these water-glassed eggs. We're gonna make what's called walls of Jericho for breakfast. I will leave a video that has this recipe in the description. Look at those beautiful water-glassed eggs from last spring. It reminds me of spring. I can't wait till our hens start laying a bunch of beautiful eggs again. And I have a helper once again. I'm still recovering from my sickness and don't trust my sense of smell. So it's wonderful to have all these children who do have their sense of smell still. They can help me judge to make sure all of these water-glassed eggs are still good to use. As you can see, the yolks on them can be kind of runny, and that doesn't mean they're bad. They're still good to eat, even if the yolks are runny. As long as they smell fine and look fine, we will use them. And here's that fresh ground wheat flour. So our recipe is for every 6 eggs that we use, we're going to use 3/4 a cup of flour and 3/4 a cup of some kind of liquid. So you can either use water, you could use cow's milk. We typically use milk alternatives. We're going to use cashew milk today. So I typically triple this recipe for my kids. So we're using 18 eggs and then adjusting the flour and the liquid. And then I just put it all into my mixer and let it whisk it all up. And then when we're done, we're going to take a 9x13 baking dish and we're just going to pour all of this in there. Today I decided to add some frozen blueberries. I'm still working through all the blueberries that we froze last winter. I'm trying to get them out of the freezer. So they make a wonderful addition to this recipe. You could also do frozen strawberries. You could do chocolate chips. Any kind of fruit or flavoring that you would put in a pancake will work really well in this Walls of Jericho. I got the name for this recipe from a friend. That's what her grandma called it, but essentially it's a Dutch baby. If you've made a Dutch baby before, it's very similar. And this is what it looks like when it's all done. We like to just sprinkle it with a little bit of powdered sugar on top. That's not necessary, but since there's no sugar in the actual mixture of the eggs, this helps sweeten it a bit, and my children like that. Also makes it kind of pretty, so why not? And then after we slice it up, some of the children like a little bit of maple syrup drizzled over top. Some of them, like right here, will just eat it plain. And then some, we will drizzle the syrup over top. And that's how they'll eat it. So yummy, yummy. It's a good breakfast. For lunch today, I'm taking a quart of our homegrown, home-canned chicken. And first thing I'm going to do is drain the broth out of it, but I'm not going to waste that broth. We're going to save that and put that in the fridge to use later this week. I have some leftover rice from yesterday's dinner. And then I have some home-canned taco sauce. I use the ball canning recipe for my taco sauce. And we're just adding about a cup of this taco sauce to that quart of chicken and then the rice. The rice will help stretch the meat a little bit. Now for our taco wraps today, since it is Taco Tuesday, I did not have time to make any, but I am going to use these that were in the freezer. This is a really expensive brand of gluten-free tortillas. I don't buy these often, but when I find them on sale, I'll buy several packages and stick them in the freezer. And I found these this week in the back of the freezer and said, this is the week we're going to use them. This will save me from having to make my own tortillas. So we need 3 packages for a meal for our family, which is why I don't buy them very often, because that can add up very quickly. But it is a nice treat on a day where you don't have time to make a tortilla. And then there is that chicken and rice mixture that we'll fill the tortillas with. We have peach hot sauce, we have some regular salsa, and we also have some pickled banana peppers from last year's garden, or maybe the year before. Yep, that was 2020. So we need to use those up. And then we'll just fill our little wraps, and the kids will have soft tacos for lunch for Taco Tuesday. Always a favorite. Baby needs to work on not spilling all of his insides of the taco out as he eats them, but all right, that's what we had for lunch on Tuesday. And then after, you can see they ate an entire jar of peppers for that meal, but I don't waste the juice. We will put that in the fridge. It's great in egg salad, tuna salad, chicken salad. I use it in all sorts of things, so don't waste that vinegary juice. I had meant to make meatballs for dinner, but school once again ran over a little bit and I didn't have time. So today we're just doing, instead of meatballs, we're just going to make a meat sauce for spaghetti. So I've got 1 pound of bison, 1 pound of our homegrown beef, and a cube of garlic scape puree. We're just kind of cooking this all up together. Nothing fancy. And then I'm going to add a quart of tomato sauce to it. And I'll add the same seasonings that I always add. And you've seen that in previous videos. So this is like fast food, last minute, spaghetti, dinner, nothing fancy. And I often default to this on nights when I don't think ahead and don't get done what I needed to get done for dinner prep. And you know what? It's usually one of the kids' favorite meals. They love spaghetti. Silly little John loves it. So it was a hit. And then tonight I'm going to start a batch of beef bone broth. I have some soup bones. These were from our heifer that we had processed last fall. So this is my smaller crock pot. I just put the bones down there in the bottom. And then I'm going to dump, this is a bag of veggie scraps that I've had in the freezer. It looks like this bag had some broccoli ends, some celery scraps, radishes. There's even some nori that was left over from the sushi we made at New Year's. Just lots of random veggies there that will add some nutrition to the broth. I'm also going to add some homegrown garlic that we have in storage. We're going to do some bay leaves, some whole peppercorns, and what else are we adding today? Oh yeah, I can't forget the salt. And then we always add a little bit of our homemade apple cider vinegar. The vinegar helps leach a little bit of the minerals from the bones and makes your broth more nutritious. So just a tiny bit. You can see how much I poured in. And then we're just going to top it off with water, fill it the rest of the way, and then we'll turn this crock pot on low and just let it simmer for the next 24 to 48 hours. The longer the better, in my opinion. You get a more gelatinous broth the longer it goes. Oh, Adam's home from work late. He's finishing up dinner. He got home a little late, so he's eating after everybody else. All right, let's get this broth finished up. I had his company while I was working on that. I try to make broth at least once a week, just to have some fresh in the fridge. Okay, today for breakfast, once again, we're using up the water-glassed eggs from last spring. Some of you have asked what water-glassed eggs are, and I will link some videos in the description explaining all about that. Today I've got my cute little helper. He's eating some mandarin oranges while I'm working on breakfast. We're going to do another leftover egg casserole. So I have some potatoes from the other night's dinner. We're just going to put them in the bottom of our pan, and then on top of it we're going to sprinkle this veggie powder. I will link it in the description below. A friend sent this to me, and I believe I have a discount code for it, so you can find that in the description. And I just sprinkle that. That'll add a little extra nutrition and vegetable goodness to our casserole for the children. And then over top of that, we're just going to pour our water-glassed eggs, added a little bit of salt and pepper, and then that'll be good to go. We just bake it in the oven on about 350 for as long as it takes for the center to harden. We have a little bit of leftover biscotti we're going to eat with it, and everybody's going to have half of a grapefruit. So really easy dinner, or I'm sorry, breakfast, and we're using up leftovers from the fridge, which is always the goal. Those potatoes would otherwise not get eaten if we didn't find a use for them. And so breakfast casseroles are a great way to use up leftover bits of meat or potatoes or even veggies that you have in your fridge. And as you can see, my kids love to have ketchup on their eggs. Ketchup is one thing that I make sure I stock up on before a pantry challenge, because if we run out of it, I would have some very unhappy campers. So we buy our ketchup typically in bulk from Azure Standard, or sometimes I can get better prices at Aldi on their organic ketchups. And I've tried making it myself, but to be honest, I've never found a homemade ketchup recipe that my children like as much as they like store-bought ketchup. So we just stick to what works, and since it's just a condiment that they're using a little bit of, I don't mind, that it's not homegrown or whatever. And we try to get the kind that is lower sugar, that isn't made with corn syrup, and it's really not that terrible for them. So, all right, getting breakfast in them, filling their bellies before we start another wonderful day of school. Lunch today, we're having smoothies. I make these differently every time I do it. We're just using what we have. I put a little bit of raw honey in the bottom of the blender today. We are going to use up some homemade cashew milk that I had in the fridge. We're also going to add a can of this organic coconut cream. I also buy that in bulk from Azure. We're going to add a little bit of beetroot powder to make it a pretty color and also add nutrition. We have frozen blueberries, some frozen bananas, and then we're going to use the rest of our dehydrated kale right here. We're just going to put all this in the blender and mix it up. And then I also decided to add a little bit of liver powder. This is homemade liver powder. I freeze-dried some of our homegrown beef liver, powdered it up, and then we just sneak this in food whenever we can. You really will not notice the flavor in that at all with all of the other sweet stuff. And so today for lunch, the kids have some leftover spaghetti or stir fry that they can eat. They've also got mandarin oranges, and then they've got their smoothies. And as you can tell, little Benjamin here is loving his smoothie. He ended up having 3 little sippy cups full, and he was a mess by the time it was over. But it was worth it because there's lots of great nutrition in there for him. Great way to sneak that beef liver in. So love seeing those little smoothie mustaches. It's so cute. And then, like I said, some of them chose to have leftover spaghetti with their smoothies, and some of them chose some of the leftover stir fry. And we like to keep lunches pretty easy around here. And then this evening we had gymnastics. I had to take the girls, and I missed filming dinner. Here are the leftover plates. David had made homemade pizza for the family, and so this was what was left when I got home. They had saved a little bit for the girls on some plates. All right, Thursday morning, let's make some pumpkin muffins for breakfast. This is my recipe. It makes 2 dozen muffins, and that's typically enough for my children. So I just do this once. We're going to use our ground up soft wheat berry flour that I had made on Sunday. That's what we're going to use to make these. And then today we are going to add butternut squash puree instead of pumpkin. They substitute perfectly for one another. You can't tell a difference in flavor or anything. It's really, one squash is really no different than the other. So butternut squash puree is actually cheaper when I buy it through Azure. So I typically buy this instead of canned pumpkin for my pumpkin breads, pumpkin pies, or pumpkin muffins. And if you have a toddler, you know that one of their favorite things to do, I don't know why they love this so much, but my kids love to fill the muffin pan with the little muffin liners. So grateful for his help today. There is the muffin mixture all ready to go in the oven. We're going to bake it, and this is what they looked like. Once again, freshly ground flour does turn out a little differently, especially if it's unsifted. We did not sift this flour, so it creates a more dense, kind of a heartier muffin, I guess, but it still tastes delicious, and the kids loved it. And then, of course, we have to have mandarin oranges with our muffins today because you can see the boxes in the background. We're still working through this. Now, I can't have the muffins, so I am just having some gluten-free toast with some sunflower seed butter on top. It's been about 36 hours since I started our beef bone broth, and I'm ready to get that into jars. So I'm just going to strain it out. Just going to take it from the crock pot, strain it into these quart-sized jars, and we are just going to put this in the fridge, and I will most likely use this broth up before the end of the week. But if I wasn't going to use it up before the end of the week, I have a couple of options. I can can my broth if I want to, if I had enough for a full load. I can also freeze it, and I very often freeze liquids in my glass canning jars. If I'm doing a quart, I always make sure I freeze it in a wide mouth jar. If you freeze in narrow mouth jars, as the liquid expands, you end up with a whole lot more cracks. But if you leave at least a 2-inch headspace on the top of these wide mouth jars, you won't have any problem at all. You just want to make sure that your broth is completely cooled. I let it cool to room temperature, and then I even put it in the fridge for a little bit to make sure it's really cool, and then I transfer the jars to the freezer. And I can't even remember the last time I've had a cracked jar. Now these ones, because they're going in the fridge, I am not leaving that much of a headspace. I would definitely double the headspace that I have here if these jars were going to be frozen. But it's always nice to have some beef broth or some chicken broth just sitting in the fridge. You never know what meal you can add them to. It's great to just add it to a soup. You can add it to your rice. You just can drink it. Sometimes I like to just drink it in a mug as a little nutritious breakfast. And there we go. We have our jars almost filled. And then what's left in here will not be wasted. My chickens will pick through this, and they will eat all of those softened cooked veggies up. I even throw the bones into the chicken run. If it were something like chicken bones that were smaller, they would actually be so brittle at this point that the chickens will eat them, and that will add extra calcium to their diet. But these bones will just end up being composted in the chicken run and will just decompose and go back to the earth where they came from. Here are our beautiful jars of broth that will congeal as they cool in the fridge. And then we also needed to unload our freeze dryer. I had an update for you on the freeze-dried lemon powder from the video I did last week about how I was preserving my citrus. Now, Gabe is enjoying these lemon slices here. He's liking that. But as you can see, I went to freeze dry it again, and I think I overdid it. It started browning, which I am not very happy about. And also, it's nearly impossible to get this lemon juice off of this tray. So I'm not a fan of this. I will probably not be freeze drying the lemon juice again. This just seems like a big waste of those lemons. I will stick to freezing them. I could try freezing the tray of lemon juice first before I put it in the freeze dryer, but I still think I'm going to have this issue of sticking to the bottom. I just think it's too sugary or something. So not everything is a win. Some people have said that they've had better results if they dilute their lemon juice with more water before they freeze dry it. But then to me, it seems like you can't fit very much lemon juice in the freeze dryer, and it just doesn't seem like an efficient way to preserve this. So we have a little bit of this powder. I'll put it on the shelf, and we'll just add this to our batches of tomato sauce or something that need to have some extra acidity when we're canning this summer, but otherwise I will not be doing that again. Okay, for today's lunch, we have the leftover chicken mixture from Tuesday's tacos. And remember that had the taco sauce, the chicken, and the rice in it. I also have more leftover rice that needs to be used up. So we're just going to add this together to double the rice mixture. And then while I'm at it, we'll add that leftover chicken broth that I drained off when I made that on Tuesday. And then we're going to add a whole nother quart of broth with a little bit of meat in the bottom from our chickens that we grew here. To that, we will add some dehydrated carrots. We're going to add some freeze-dried cauliflower. We actually ended up switching the cauliflower to broccoli, and then we had some dehydrated kale that we're going to use up. We're just going to mix all of this in a pot. As you can see here, we did end up deciding to switch to broccoli over cauliflower. Gabe was standing in the kitchen, and he said he prefers broccoli to cauliflower, and so I let him pick. Anyways, this will all warm up on the wood stove while I make some cookies for the kids. Here's the cookie recipe I chose today. This is kind of a healthier chocolate chip cookie alternative, and I like it during pantry challenges because it doesn't use a lot of oil. So in place of the applesauce in the recipe, we're using peach sauce today, and that will give it some lovely flavor. Here's how those turned out. We did use the freshly ground flour, so once again, these are going to be a denser cookie than if we were using a sifted, fluffy, store-bought wheat flour. But they still turned out delicious. The kids loved them, and as far as cookies go, they really aren't that bad for them. I don't mind giving these to the kids as a little midday treat. There's good nutrition in there, and they went great with our soup. This is how that turned out after it was on the wood stove all day. Someone snuck a cookie while I wasn't looking and got in a little trouble. The evidence was on his face. Anyways, here's how that soup turned out, and everybody enjoyed that. And then if they ate their soup, they each got to eat 2 cookies. So that's not bribery. That's just a reward for if you're still hungry after you eat your lunch, you get the good stuff. And oh my goodness, look at this messy little boy. Everyone is enjoying the meal. Everybody got cookies, I think, that day. And then for dinner tonight, we are using up the beef heart that we have in the freezer. It's one of those cuts of meats that you don't use very often. And when you're in a pantry challenge, the point is to try to use up the stuff in the freezer. So we are having beef heart tonight. It's so good for you. So I cook my beef heart just like I cook a beef roast. I just put it in a covered dish, and then I add some sort of liquid. Today we're adding home canned barbecue sauce that I need to use up. I'm just going to pour this directly over the beef heart, and then we're going to cover the dish, and we're just going to put it in the oven to let it slow roast for most of the day on about 275. And that will cook, and it will soften up, and it's going to taste delicious. In the meantime, while it's cooking, we're still working on juicing lemons. And as I mentioned, I'm not freeze drying our lemon juice anymore. We are just going to stick with putting it in the freezer in our pint jars. So about twice a day, we get out the electric juicer and we work through as many lemons as we can before the motor sounds like it needs a break. And then hopefully by the end of this week, we'll be through all the lemons and the freezer will be stocked. Today, we are turning some of that into lemonade for the kids. I'm adding a little bit of beetroot powder to the lemonade. I was told by a few people that it makes it a fun pink color if you do that, and so that was kind of my goal in doing this. Now, beetroot powder does have kind of an earthy flavor, so if you use too much, that will impact the taste of whatever you're using, but just a little bit, like a couple teaspoons, isn't going to affect the flavor much. And it was really fun. It turned it into a pink lemonade that the kids really enjoyed. So thank you for that tip, whoever gave it to me. Tonight for dinner with the beef heart, we're frying up potatoes once again. I told you I'm trying to get rid of these softened potatoes. And then just easy peasy, we're having a quart of home canned sweet corn. Here's how that beef heart turned out when you slice it. Now, beef heart has the texture of a steak since it is a muscle. But when you slow cook it this way, it tastes a lot like a beef roast. And I guarantee you it tastes better than it looks. It's actually really good. And it's a moist meat, and it's just full of good nutrition. You've got to eat your organ meat. So if you purchase a half a cow or a full cow, don't let the organs go to waste. And also don't let the drippings of it go to waste. We are going to put those drippings in a jar here, and we're going to save them, and those will flavor our soup that we're going to have tomorrow. So here we go. We got pink lemonade. We've got our meal. It's nothing pretty to look at, but it will fill my kids' bellies and give them lots of good nutrition. And as you can see, even a 3-year-old loves the beef heart, of course with ketchup, because my kids, as I mentioned, love ketchup, but they will gladly eat it, even knowing that it is heart. And you just have to normalize these foods as nothing icky or gross for your kids, and they'll eat it because it tastes good. It really does. For breakfast today, we are having blue corn cornbread using the blue corn that we ground into flour last Sunday. This is the recipe that I use. Today I'm going to omit the sugar because we don't need it, the way we're going to eat it. Here's that blue corn, and it's been sitting in the fridge all week to preserve the nutrition of it. Here's the rest of the freshly ground flour. It's also been in the fridge. We're going to use our cashew milk. We have some eggs. We have our baking powder. And we have salt. Once again, I'm not putting sugar in these because the kids are going to eat it with maple syrup over top. So I just put everything into my mixer. We're going to mix it all around, and then we're going to bake it on 425 for 20 to 25 minutes, as long as it takes to cook. There's what it looks like. And then I'm going to use my fun little cast iron. These are antique cast iron pans. I grease them very generously with lard or some kind of thick, greasy substance. Butter you could use, palm fruit shortening, but you really want to grease them well. And these are really fun. We have fun going antiquing and finding these fun little pans to use. You can see the color of that blue corn. It's kind of a purpley color when it's wet, which is really pretty. And then as it bakes, it will darken into the most beautiful blue color. And then to serve with our cornbread, we're going to have some scrambled eggs. Once again, using up the water glassed eggs. Got our hot pan with our oil in it. I'm just going to pour those eggs in and scramble them up. And then when your cornbread comes out of the oven, if you greased it properly, as you can see, it will just pop right out. And look at those cute little pieces of corn. Aren't they fun? We really enjoy making our cornbread in these shapes. And then there we had the little triangle wedges, and we also had the little round corn cakes. So essentially the way that we're going to eat this for breakfast, if you've ever made a Johnny cake, which is basically a pancake that's made with cornmeal or corn flour instead of wheat flour, that's how we're going to eat these. So we pour maple syrup over the top of them, and that's why I left the sugar out of the recipe, because this will sweeten them enough. And then the kids will just eat that with their scrambled eggs. So a lot of people don't think to eat cornbread for breakfast, but it's a nice way to break up the grains that you're having, something different to have in the morning versus having wheat pancakes every day or buckwheat or oatmeal. Why not have a little corn as well? I mentioned this on Instagram the other day that I've been told that the presentation of my meals is lacking in quality, but I just want to remind you that children do not care about that at all. They just want something that is warm and delicious that will fill their belly, and they don't really care how it looks. And to be honest, they're lucky that they get it on a dish and that I don't just throw everything in the middle of the table and let them fend for themselves, because they create quite a few dishes every meal. So this is the presentation that we use. For lunch today, we're having good old split pea soup. It's a family favorite, and I've done several videos, I think, on my split pea process, but we're just gonna, I didn't think ahead and soak my split peas and lentils the night before, so that's okay. I'm just taking some directly out of my buckets here. And for my family, I do about 5 of these scoops for a batch of soup. And then to my soup, I always add lentils. I have some red lentils in the house, so I don't really measure. I just pour it in. You don't have to soak them, but it does help with the cook time. But if I don't soak them, I do make sure to rinse them so that it cleans the peas and the lentils. So I just run some water over them and rinse them off, and we've got them in the bottom of our pan and ready to make soup. With split pea soup, I typically just use whatever I have in the fridge to make it. So here's what we're using today. We're going to add some quarts of beef broth that we had made earlier this week that have been sitting in the fridge. We're going to add a potato to it because we always like that. We're going to add parsley, add some bay leaves, some dehydrated carrots, and Then I added a cube of that garlic scape puree. We're also going to add some onion powder. Got that all mixed up. I decided to add the drippings from the beef heart we made last night. We'll add that in for a little extra flavor and nutrition. And then I love making soup because while we're doing school today, we won't have to waste any electricity. This can just sit on top of the wood stove and simmer, and it will cook it up and soften it up for us. I just have to remember to stir every now and then. I cook on top of the wood stove without a trivet a lot of the times. If the fire's not roaring too hot, you don't need it, and it won't burn to the bottom. Just make sure you stir it every now and then. And after about 2.5 to 3 hours, this is what our soup looks like. So delicious. You know, split pea soup is one of those ugly meals that everybody talks about. You know, it looks like, doesn't look that appealing, but it just tastes so good. The peas are so sweet, and you have all of that broth and just yummy goodness. All right, dinner was really simple tonight. I put 2 Swiss steaks in the oven. I was running short on time, so I boiled some red potatoes without skinning them, and then I just smashed them. So we're having garlic smashed potatoes here. Really simple and easy. That's what I do when I don't have time to peel my potatoes, which is quite often. And then for our vegetable side, we're just doing some canned carrots. And this will go great with these Swiss steaks. These were covered in Italian seasoning and some garlic. And Swiss steak is not my favorite cut of meat. It's kind of tough, but it was in the pantry and we need to use it up, so that's what we're doing tonight. And then, of course, it's Friday, so David's been busy making biscotti. Tomorrow is his birthday, and he wanted to make birthday biscotti, so he used some buttercream flavoring to make his special biscotti. All right, and so everybody is eating up their dinner. We had a lot of beef this week. Next week, I'm going to focus on trying to eat a little more pork and fish and chicken. But this was the week, apparently, of using up different cuts of beef that we had in the freezer. And this is his biscotti. David has not shared his biscotti recipe yet because he would like to create a cookbook one day. And so normally he puts a glaze on top, but we ran out of powdered sugar. So we had to make our own powdered sugar. And all we did is we took regular cane sugar and put it in our blender. We don't really have a fancy blender. This is just a Ninja blender. And it did a great job. I've actually been told if you add a little bit of starch to it, like an arrowroot powder or a tapioca starch or potato starch, that will get you more the texture of store-bought powdered sugar. But you know what? What we did here worked out just fine. And he was able to make his glaze. So that's the fun part about a pantry challenge, is learning what you can do without. I'm not sure we're even going to buy powdered sugar anymore if it's this easy to make our own. Why buy 2 items when I can just buy more cane sugar? And I'm pretty sure that just buying the cane sugar is cheaper than buying the powdered sugar. So it's a good deal. As I mentioned, David every Friday makes biscotti. And this is what we usually have on Saturday mornings for breakfast because we all like to sleep in, and this just saves me having to make a big breakfast on Saturdays. So we love his biscotti. His favorite biscotti to make is lemon. He also makes a really good cinnamon. He's done a pistachio cranberry one that's amazing, but he would like to probably make a whole cookbook of just biscotti. And his is pretty amazing because it's dairy-free. I'm really proud of him. He's worked hard to kind of perfect these recipes. All right, guys, so that's it for me for the first month of the Three Rivers Challenge. I will continue documenting for you during the second month, in the month of February. But I guess so far in 1 month, I have saved my family between $700 and $800 in food. I have spent nothing on food. We've bought nothing except for that bulk citrus order that I place every year. It's ordered in December and then we pick it up in January. But other than that, there's nothing we've had to buy. We've only run out of a few things, like some random condiments. I ran out of coconut aminos. We're nearly out of black pepper, which is unfortunate. I don't know how I let that happen, but we do have whole peppercorns, so if I have to, I will grind those down to use them. We ran out of powdered sugar, but that's also not a big deal because we have regular cane sugar that we can put in the blender and make our own powdered sugar. So we're going to be fine. I don't anticipate running out of too much more here before the end of February. But But it's just, that's kind of one of the fun parts of the challenge is when you do run out, you figure out how you can live without it, what substitutions you can make. And then in past years' pantry challenges, I've actually realized that I no longer need to keep those items that I ran out of in stock anymore, because it makes much more sense for me to just use the items that I have that I substituted for, because they're already in the pantry and I have them in bulk. And it's just a great way to learn how to streamline your pantry so that you can just buy more of less items, if that makes sense, and get the good bulk prices on your items, and then use those items for more uses in your kitchen, I guess. So anyways, it's fun. It's always a learning experience, and I feel like we're going to learn even more in the month of February. My videos are going to change a little bit over next month. I'm still going to share my meals with you, but so that I'm not being redundant and sharing the same meals, as we might next month repeat some of the meals that we've already made, I'm just going to be sharing some highlights of the week and show you some of my favorite meals and favorite substitutions that I've done, so that I'm not sharing things that we've already shared in the month of January. So hopefully you'll find that helpful, and I look forward to sharing more with you. Thank you to everybody who's participating. I've been having so much fun watching your videos and following along on the hashtag, both here and on Instagram. So this is a really wonderful community. Thank you all for being a part of it. All right, I'll see you next week, folks. Bye.